Only development that is sustainable is meaningful for the future. Nepal's development over the last decade has seen remarkable progress, with growth averaging 4.9% per year. This has enabled the country to attain lower middle income status in 2020. Nepal has expanded access to electricity and drinking water, improved youth literacy, raised primary and secondary school enrollment, and reduced infant mortality. The country's transition to federalism has also offered opportunities translating economic prosperity, social justice, and climate and disaster resilience into a comprehensive development approach. Nepal, at the same time, is highly vulnerable to climate and disaster risk. Rising temperatures, melting glaciers, and more intense rainfall are expected to increase climate-related hazards, affecting people, the economy, the environment, and hard-earned development gains.
To respond to this challenge, Nepal is already implementing steps to recalibrate its economy by adopting a green, resilient, and inclusive development approach, a GRID approach.
This shared strategic priority is not only about recovering from COVID, but it's also about greening this growth, making it resilient and inclusive.
To support the GRID agenda, a new World Bank Group report, Nepal's Country Climate and Development Report, or CCDR, examines the growing evidence of the climate change challenge in Nepal and identifies ways for Nepal to achieve its overall development objectives.
In September of 2022, the Nepal Country Climate and Development Report was published. This report reflects the work of all of our development teams, ranging from poverty to infrastructure to forestry to macroeconomics to education. The report, the CCDR, proposes 7 policy packages and a collective 32 policy actions over the next 5 years. Our goal is to contribute to the public debate in Nepal on climate change and to enrich the discussion with new analyses at the sector level.
So we know that Nepal can make real progress in real areas, but development in Nepal remains highly unequal and highly unsustainable. So if we're going to end extreme poverty in Nepal and no one is to be left behind, then Nepal needs to adopt and implement policies to promote more sustainable development. So the Country Climate and Development Report does have a set of recommendations that do ask financiers and the Nepali government, Nepali people, to consider doing things a little bit differently so that they can withstand future climate shock.
The CCDR suggests prioritizing investments in hydropower, integrated landscape management for better performance of agriculture, forests, and water sectors, sustainable urban development, and climate-resilient transport systems, as well as adaptive social protection. The World Bank is committed globally to align all of its financing to the objectives of the Paris Agreement on climate change by July 1st, 2023.
So Nepal has huge vulnerabilities to weather and climate events which are going to be exacerbated by climate change. In agriculture, the way to mitigate those effects is to what we call climate-smart agriculture. Climate-smart agriculture helps farmers adapt better to weather and climate risks, increase their productivity so they have a higher income, and reduce emissions from greenhouse gases in agriculture.
The World Bank is financing a new water supply operation. And in this new infrastructure, they're also planning to stabilize the watershed above the water treatment infrastructure. And to stabilize that watershed, that will address the climate risks of sporadic water availability. And this is an example of how we need to do things a little bit differently than in the past. So this requires working with agriculture, with forestry, with farmers, with local people up in the hills so that the water treatment down in the city is sustainable.
Well, government has to develop the clear policy of hydropower development in terms of expansion plan in a very discussed manner. Electricity use or energy use transition has to be taken into account. So in terms of energy use also, there is a great opportunity in Nepal to introduce electric vehicle, electric cooking and electric transport system like ropeways so that hydropower electricity, the clean energy that the country has generated, is utilized to replace the dirty energy And also there is a clear opportunity for exporting hydroelectricity across the border to India and Bangladesh, and it will help to address the climate change regionally as well as globally.
For this particular CCDR and given the priorities of Nepal, 3 areas have been particularly highlighted. On the adaptation front, constructing and maintaining resilient infrastructure. Every year, somewhere between 1.5 to 2% of GDP is lost as a result of climate hazards. The second priority is on the emission side, and here it's basically solid waste management, contributing about 5% of total emissions of Nepal, given that the sector is not much developed. And the last priority, also again related to increasing urbanization. Every year, somewhere between 30 to 40,000 buildings are added across Nepal cities. These buildings are not constructed in energy efficient manner. They basically contribute further to emissions, both from the time that they're constructed, as well as for the future energy use.
Nepal needs to move towards a greener mobility. GHG emissions from transport for Nepal is amongst the highest in the world. For passengers, there is a need to move to other forms of shared mobility, electric mobility and so on. For the logistics sector, a lot of its trucks actually is outdated, emitting a lot of GHG emissions. So there is a need for a closer look to use better technology. There's also a need to promote businesses along the e-mobility value chain so that we're not just selling electric cars, but we're also making sure that it's serviced and engaging the private sector into that process.
Everybody knows that climate change offers a lot of opportunities along with the challenges that it presents. But for this to happen, Nepal, we think, would need to do a number of things. The first one is really to continue to improve the business environment. Then we also recommend to have a broad roadmap to really lay out the way private capital for green project will be increased and promoted. The other recommendation is to put in place a climate risk assessment for the financial system, but the overall economy in general. And then we also have made a recommendation to scale up carbon credit uses and deepen capital market.
This enabler is about people, the households and communities. The policy interventions proposed here will help enable changes in behavior and consumption patterns through climate education, equip people with the right set of skills for a green economy through reskilling and upskilling, enhance financing to cover climate-related health risks, including better surveillance of such risks and better health service delivery, and very importantly, ensure that social protection programs and systems are shock responsive.
In the case of Nepal, the key enabler is the need to have clarity in terms of the specific roles and responsibilities of the key players, particularly the 3 tiers of the government, the state-owned enterprises, also the private sector given their important role. Based on this clarity, there is also a need to develop appropriate governance structure and arrangements, as well as build capacity of the relevant agencies to enable them to effectively discharge their roles and responsibilities.
Given the context that the country is highly vulnerable to natural as well as climate-induced disaster events, the climate and disaster risk events will have profound impacts in each of the development sectors. We need to focus in the technology investment. Considering the microclimatic variations of the country, we need to increase the number of weather, water and climate stations across the country so that we'll get the data and analyze them and use them for the sectoral sustainable development.
The World Bank Group's Country Climate and Development Report for Nepal in this regard aims to help the country prioritize policies and drive climate-smart investments for a green, resilient and inclusive development. By working together, the government, private sector, finance community, civil society and development partners can make this vision a reality.